What happened after that?
So what happened after that? I had a nice holiday. Obviously got promoted.
Is this the return to Leyton Orient?
It is. It is.
Interesting.
Barry offered me a 4-year deal as a coach more than playing.
Well, at Peterborough.
At Peterborough. On reflection, that probably should have been my angle. Plymouth wanted to have me back and offered me a benefit game.
Well, like a testimonial.
A testimonial, but it wasn't a testimonial.
Bearing in mind, you played 101 times for Plymouth.
Yes,
so you've had.
But they offered me a benefit game. It was sort of just to try and cancel out what Leyton Orient had offered me, because Leyton Orient had offered me the testimonial.
Interesting.
And so I basically bounced it back to Plymouth, and they sort of said, "Look, we'd like you back, and I will give you a benefit game." Yeah. So I had the choice. As I say, my wife's from Plymouth. She didn't want to go back.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, she's escaped it once. She's like, that's it. We're done with Plymouth.
Yeah. I think so. A little bit like how it was with me when I left Plymouth and I didn't want to go back to London.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, no, let the adventure carry on, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
And so yeah, I had the option to go back to Leyton Orient. Now it does go back to the playoff final. This the Leyton Orient thing and why it didn't work out, because I actually tore my cartilage the day of the playoff game at Peterborough. In the training, we trained over at Cheshunt, and I knew it had gone.
That's bad luck.
It was, but I weren't telling anyone, and I ended up playing for 90 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
In the benefit of hindsight, do you think that?
Oh, I'm a fool.
Yeah.
I'm walking around like a cripple now.
Yeah.
And I've had an operation, having a rig since that. Should I have done it?
Would you do it again if you had to?
Because of the amount of pain I've gone through over the last 10 years, I don't know.
Really?
If you'd have asked me 10 years ago, I'd have said, yeah, I'd have done that. Yeah.
I reckon if you have a couple of beers, you'd definitely change your mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't have swapped the Wembley appearance. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I ended up. So that probably brings itself on to Leyton Orient. We had the playoff game. I had an operation straight after. The operation, I got my knee infected, which I didn't know. Signed for Leyton Orient. Started the pre-season, had 2 or 3 games. Knee kept on blowing up. Time after time after time. Cut a long story short, they cut a lot of the infection out. After probably about Christmas time, I had a couple of games. I played up at Barrow in the first round of Cup, and it just blew up again. And I thought, this is it. I've got to pack up. So I didn't hardly played that season that I went back to Orient.
So you must be
again a little bit of a low.
Yeah, it must be frustrating to go back to a club that you love so much and you've accomplished and achieved, not to be able to give something on your final swan song, if you like.
Exactly. And I couldn't do myself justice when I was playing, which was frustrating. I was always getting injured. I had a testimonial, as I said, and it was part of the deal. But if I'm truthful, and this is where I'm a little bit silly, I didn't have much interest in it. And now I know it is a bit of a money, sort of money for myself.
Yeah, and it's a huge compliment from the club.
It is a huge compliment. I couldn't see that because I didn't think I was doing myself justice.
To organise an event for a single player, no matter what, it's a big thing, isn't it?
So that first year, I just put it on the back burner, if I'm honest. And I knew I had to get it done. And so, obviously, I knew Glenn Hoddle through my friend, and I know John Gorman. I went to Tottenham, and that's my club that I supported as well. They, bless them, had just got Teddy Sheringham back, and Teddy was one I played county football with. He was coming back from United, I believe, in the 2000 back to Tottenham, and we got 7,500 at Leyton Orient, which was brilliant. But I never really put my heart and soul into it. We didn't do any golf days. We didn't do any race nights or anything like that because there was a little bit of embarrassment from me. that I wasn't playing first team football. I'm limping around.
I understand that.
I felt a bit of a fraud, if I'm truthful. Obviously there was an awful lot of supporters that knew me from yesteryear, but it just tainted what was a very good relationship at Leyton Orient, if I'm honest.
You played 256 games for Leyton Orient. It's something that no one can take away, and I don't think anyone would have looked at you as a fraud for being injured.
No.
For I said, for the performances and the amount of time and effort you gave that club. I'm sure their fans look back on you with fond memories.
And as I say,
he was voted by Twitter and a few other internet polls as one of the greatest captains ever.
Yes,
as well.
No, I did see that. And that's great. That's a great compliment. And I'm really, I'm pleased with that. And I did get in. I think Peterborough's, Plymouth's all-time team as their midfield, one of their best midfield players. So they're good things I can look back on as well. But at the time, I'm just being honest with you in regards to how I felt at the time, and it was a little bit of like that I was being a bit of a fraud. I got told by a surgeon to pack up. I couldn't play full-time football.
It's a big thing to deal with when you've played football your whole life. It's all you know.
Yeah. I mean, you can't see the wood through the trees because, you just think, right, I just had a little one. It was my firstborn. We'd moved into our first main house up in Stalford. Yes, it was okay. And yes, I'd looked after ourselves, but it was right. Okay, now what? So it was a little bit of coaching. I went and coached West Ham's under-13s. Mark Noble, James Tompkins, amongst two that were in and around the academy at the time.
Did you know straight away that Mark Noble would have a Premier League career when you're watching him at that age?
He looked better than everybody else, yeah.
I know it's hard to gauge because of physicalities, like we spoke about, how players develop.
Yeah. And then the opposite of that, James Tompkins, who's made a very good career at Palace, and he weren't the quickest. He was very, very calm, very calculated, good player, tall, but you wouldn't look at him and go, "Wow,
Premier League quality instantly."
No. So it doesn't always follow. And then there was another lad called Dave Cowley, and he was the lad that was, oh my God, all singing, all dancing. And Dave has done well. I think he played a few league games, but generally he moved into non-league and didn't quite hit the heights. So
why do you think? I know there's a varied amount of reasons and stuff. There could be managers coming in, managers going out, sort of lifestyle choices. But why do you think players at 15, who are literally top of their group, they are the player that you would go, look, he's the one to watch in this group? Why do you think they don't make that development from youth team or reserve football into first team football?
I think there's quite a few things that you could say. Everybody that you sort of and you go, you need a bit of luck. I think you need a bit of good fortune. I think you need things to stand out at the time. Going over this podcast again and what I said to you before when I made my debut at Leyton Orient, and I scored that goal, and then I scored the 4 goals. Yeah. And they're just little pivotal times that, is it the be-all and end-all of a career? Of course it's not. But it is that sort of thing that it stays with
and it helps you push on.
Yes. And I think they're the type of things that if lads can have. And I tell you what, there was one, you might have to remind me, the lad that's just come into Arsenal, I've forgotten his name, the real good...
Pepe?
No,
Martinelli.
Yeah. And it reminded me of important moments, and that run that he done, and where Kante fell over, and it made it look as if Martinelli had gone past everybody, which he had, and it was a great forward thing.
Interesting.
But if Kante hasn't fallen over, that thing don't happen. Martinelli don't look and don't get the plaudits. And it just stayed with me a little bit,
Interesting.
So it's just little pivotal things that I think, is it good fortune? Is it good play? I don't know. But at the same time, there's got to be dedication. There's got to be a knowledge that you've got to do basics and the right things more times than you don't. And like, you know, there's things as a coach, and you go into it and you sort of like, right, you just look at the Premiership stuff and how many times, or how least times they give the ball away. You know, when they are going to do all their, you know, skillful bits and pieces, it's in the right areas.
What
They're not
area of the
doing like
pitch they're
that.
doing their tricks.
Exactly. You know, I mean, it's, you know, they're the type of things that you look and you just sort of like, you know, is that going to happen at 15? Probably not. But I think between 15 and now, because you got under 23s, I think between 15 and 21. But if it's not coming gradually, I don't think it's ever going to come, you know. And I think we have this thing in this country where, you know, I think not that we think we're better than we are, but we've got to play football just for sort of like showboating stuff, you know. And that showboating stuff, it's not me. It don't win games. But what I think it does attract the person in the short term. But if you are looking at a proper football coach and a proper football scout, he'll look at basics, and he will look. And the thing that really strikes me is Brentford and the Moneyball stuff, and it's all stats. And he ain't doing bad out of it. And I'm not saying that, you know, you could, you know, my stats, for argument's sake, would have got me in the Premier League. Was I good enough to play in the Premier League? Nowhere near it.
But the stats said you could have done a good job.
My stats would have said I would have been in it all day long. So that's probably a contradiction. I've contradicted myself there. But, you know, the basics, goals, crosses, you know, because like now everything is just broken down into stats, and you know, you can say how many kilometers people have done, how many touches they've had done, how many releases they've had done, how many balls into the box, how many shots, it's ridiculous how much stats you can get on lads now, you know. And I think if you're not doing the basics right, that is something that has to be ingrowing into you at a very early age, and it's got to stay with you.
After spending some time coaching at West Ham, what was the next move for yourself?
Right, so it was to get a job, and I'm quite plain, and you know, I'm not the most gifted qualification-wise. I had a little one, as I said before, and she's just a newborn. We had, you know, cash, but we just sort of like, right, to get on with things and progress in life. It was an avenue that I wanted to go down, but the only trouble with football coaching and football coaching alone, it don't pay very well. Doing the academy at West Ham, and it's great for a little bit of pin money, but you know, to get yourself or get myself into a situation where I was doing football coaching. So, cut a long story short, I got offered to go back into playing at St Albans.
Is this a temptation for a lot of older players where, like you said, the coaching ain't paying as much as you would possibly need to live? This is it. These non-league clubs get on the phone. Yeah. They're like, "Look, we can give you a wage."
Yeah, and I don't listen. I mean, you know, I don't mind not to expect, but you know, they just said, "Look, we'll give you 200 quid cash," and you just sort of, right, okay, well, with all due respect, I think I was getting 30 quid a session at West Ham. You know, and like sort of they were expecting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday,
do you think
Sundays.
This is what is wrong with the game in some respects? That the money's not filtering through.
It's not that it's not filtering through. The lads that are doing it out of prestige rather than quality.
And trying to get somewhere with it.
And I'm not saying that you've had to have played 500 league games and, you know, sort of, you need to have played the game to a certain level, in my view, to have that experience. Yeah. I think you can get away with it with not playing if you're a very intelligent lad, very astute, and that you picking up things very well. But the way that you do pick up things is by experiencing them. Yeah. So I do feel that there has to be an element of that your knowledge comes from personal experience. It's coaching isn't easy. we've alluded to it with Trevor Francis and Glenn Hoddle. You know, you know what you want. You you probably don't see what you want. So how are you going to go about it and change it? And I think I got into the trap of probably doing what most coaches have done. I've got my qualifications, I got my A licence, and you know that was great and everything like that. And probably just right, I'm an ex-footballer, I've got my A licence, I can coach. No, don't work that way. You just start off, and you should have another apprenticeship. You should go into your coaching career with exactly the same amount of determination and dedication as you would your football career.
Yep.
And listen and learn and experience the coaching side of things as much as your own experiences as a player.
What are some of the invaluable lessons you've learned as a coach that you think will stand you in good stead for management? I know there's many. If you could just pick out a couple of facets that you feel are very important that you've learned and gauged from the coaching that will stand you in stead for your management.
Well, I mean, like sort of now, sitting here at 54, I've been in the coaching for a hell of a long time, and what I pride myself on is non-league football. Even college football, lads want to play for me. Lads very, very rarely do they want to leave mid-season. Obviously, if they're not playing, maybe that might not be. Even then, I have had lads in non-league football that have left, hasn't quite right, like to come back and play for you. And I think that I've got that because what I will be is perfectly blunt and honest with them. And whether we like it or not, it probably comes back to that Barry Fry conversation that he had with me, is that we ain't going to get everything right. I might have made a mistake by getting rid of you, but you know what? I'll give you a second chance, but you will get told. And I think we all respect that honesty that comes from it.
How did you make the transition then from playing non-league to then becoming the manager at Royston? Because it seems something that you're really relishing at the moment with this role with Royston.
Yeah, but
I'd like to see how it sort of came to fruition for you.
Okay. Yeah, well, it weren't an easy one, and nothing has been really in that. But I think when it's not easy, you probably end up the other side of it, appreciating it a little bit more, if that makes sense. So how it went was that I left Leyton Orient, went over to St Albans as a player, and only as a player. They had a disagreement, the management team. One of the management team tried to get me a job at Cambridge City as one of their managers. I read between the lines, and I think he wanted me out of St Albans City because I think he thought I was a bit of a threat, even though I've never snaked anyone in my life.
It's a weird world, this football management lark, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's very, very uncertain. It's very, very the paranoia.
It's quite an unscrupulous industry to work in. I'm taking it.
It is, and you know, I mean, like the amount of times people are going for jobs and they're already gone. You know, you're putting CVs in, and like it's he knows the chairman better than anybody else. It's you know, I know that is proper life, and that does go on, but probably as a naive ex-footballer, you probably don't think, and you think you're probably a little bit more above that your CV and your playing experience and even your managerial coaching experience is going to get you ahead of those things. That don't happen.
Things are sewn up before they're announced, aren't they?
So the scenario was I was playing at St Albans. Someone sold me the dream about that they wanted to buy Peterborough, and that they were going to make me first team coach.
Well, like a consortium
yeah,
sort
it was
of
just
thing.
a local lad in Ilford, and I got sucked in basically. and he wanted to go up there. I don't think it ever happened, but Barry was quite happy to listen to offers because he was owning Peterborough at the time. So I made the introductions. It didn't happen, but I left St Albans then. It was another one, a little bit like the Wimbledon thing. It just petered out. Nothing happened. So I went back to St Albans, played for a little bit. This falling out happened between the chairman and the manager. The manager went, and so the assistant manager asked me to be his assistant.
So sort of promotion by default, if
yeah,
you like.
it was really, and I was ready to pack up because I was sort of not really enjoying it. The knees were just sort of gone, so I went in and ended doing that. Lad's name was Steve Cook. He was a really good lad, but it didn't quite happen. This is where it gets a little bit nasty. I was accused of stealing his job, and I can tell you on my kid's life, I've done none of the sort.
I'm guessing these accusations are quite rife in football when one manager would leave.
Yeah.
Someone else has got to take the reins.
It was the previous manager. He went off to another club. He got into what was his assistant head, that I was the one that was grassing him up, snaking him up, however you want to sort of like say, but being, not very positive about things. Cut a long story short, the chairman sacked him, asked me to take over. I took over, and truthfully, I weren't very good.
That's your honest opinion.
I weren't very good.
I love that. I love the honesty,
I weren't very
Steve.
good. I did it, and I did it like I was, now I could look back on it. What are we looking at? We're talking about probably 10, 15 years ago. And I just did it.
Do you think you took it too seriously? You think you didn't take it seriously enough? What was the issue with it?
I think I wasn't au fait with non-league football. Okay. I wanted them to do it in a certain way.
So you had the same syndrome that top managers that we'd spoken about have had on a higher level.
Exactly.
Yeah, that same complex.
Yeah. And I couldn't probably, I couldn't get it over well enough. I didn't recruit well enough. I went with mates of mine. Yeah. And that's a big mistake.
Doing favours rather than doing what the team needed.
I had a lad, and he, if he gets to hear this, sorry, Chris, but he was a mate of mine.
No offence, Chris.
One of my best mates, and he's a Kiwi international. He's played over 50, 60 times for his country.
That's a lot of caps.
New Zealand.
Yeah.
He'd come back from playing in Australia, and his wife was English. Come back, he was on good money, but he hadn't been kicked in 6 years, and he went into non-league football, and it was just a complete contrast. So my biggest earner is not used to non-league football.
I bet the chairman loved that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I had 2 or 3 that I've done and made mistakes. I resigned. I'd had enough.
It's a tough one though. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Like when you've got these, like you said, someone that's had 50, 60 caps for their country, you're going to bring him into non-league. He's going to light the place up. Surely you're thinking.
But this is where, as I say, it is managerial skills, but there is a bit of good fortune.
Yeah.
I'm not to know that this lad that
he's not going to get being kicked up in the air.
This lad that's played against Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, a German starlet, and he's played in the Nations Cup.
So they're equivalent of like the Euros, if you like.
Yeah. New Zealand played, sort of against, all the top teams. He was the captain of their country.
There's a New Zealand in the Oceania pool, so that would be like Australia.
He is, yeah.
Some good nations he'd be playing against, some good sides.
Yeah, but come back, and as I say, and he was the first one to admit it. He played a pre-season game. He said, I ain't been kicked in 6 years. They're like, because they're playing, he played the Brisbane Strikers.
They're like showcase games, really, aren't they?
Yeah. So, and there was 2 or 3 like that, which is, too boring to sort of go into. But I didn't make the right mistakes. It got on top of me because I couldn't do anything about it.
I suppose once your budget's used on these players, you can't then manoeuvre any money to get anyone in. No. And then you're looking at other non-league players who, for whatever reason, haven't made that
But
transition.
I didn't really have a network of non-league footballers.
Really?
And that's where, well, I didn't, I
You haven't
hadn't,
come
I
from
hadn't
that-
gone
that-
from that background.
Yes.
And
yes.
so like now, looking back on it, and now I have got this vast array of non-league footballers that I can just call on, you know, because I've been doing it for 15 years. I can actually say over, you know, sort of an interview that I was crap.
So knowing your own market was a big, or not knowing your own market in this case, where you
Yeah.
look to apply your trade, was a big hindrance for yourself
Yeah.
because you didn't have the connections to get them
Exactly.
players who are good at that level, who
Yeah.
have had the experience, who know what's
Yeah.
needed, and are happy to work on a budget as
Yeah.
well.
So I
Interesting.
resigned. Chairman accepted the resignation. They took the club up, St Albans, but they quickly went down. So they went up to the National League and then went back down to the Conference South, and then had a horrendous time. I mean, what you do notice with non-league football, that happens up and down.
Where chairmans
there.
leave and people
Yeah.
go, money comes in and out.
But I'd set my college scheme up, and so I was still working for St Albans within this time. So they'd had about 3 or 4 managers. I was on the thing, yet again, not looking to get myself back. Cut a long story short, they really went on their backside and were looking to get relegated out of Conference South. And I couldn't have done that much wrong because they asked me to do it again. I kept them up, and then we got 12th with no budget at all, 2 years running. They had a new takeover and decided that I was no longer needed, but I still carried on doing my college stuff with St Albans.
The stuff that you'd set
And
up.
I still do.
Yeah.
It's my 16th year over there, and I'm enjoying that. I family-wise, just had twin boys, and so it is over 15 years because they're 15 now.
Yeah.
So
happy birthday for the boys coming up as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I got to the situation. I came out of it. I needed that break. I had a break for about 6 months, and then someone asked me to do a local football club, which was Step 5 in Takeley Football Club. Very good football club at Step 5. That's
what's step 5, by
Step
the way?
5
Sorry
non-league
to interrupt
football.
you.
So if you like, forget about the EFL stuff. Okay, non-league football starts with the National League. Yeah, so that's Step 1. Conference South, Conference North is Step 2.
Okay, right.
And then I'm at the moment with Royston, and we are in Southern League Premier Central, which Isthmian Premier Central. So they're all premiers,
Yeah.
and that's Step 3.
Okay.
And then underneath that, you've got another league and another league. So
And
we
then
were,
to step 5.
and then Step 5. I think it goes down to about Step 8. I think Harefield are in about Step 6, something like that. So it's like, just to give you an example.
Yeah.
So I came out of it. I enjoyed with no real pressure of managing a Step 5 club. A pal of mine took over at Cambridge United, asked me to be his assistant. I'd done that for 6 or 7 months. I'd rather not go into what happened there, but it was a love-hate relationship.
You can't say
really.
that to a man that runs a podcast.
No, I suppose I can't. Okay. Basically, a lad called Jimmy Quinn took over. He asked me to be his assistant manager. We both done Peterborough together. Jimmy was an incredible footballer and a good manager, but he hadn't really dedicated himself to moving from Crewe down to Cambridge. We were looking at getting relegated out of the National League.
I'm guessing tensions were pretty high at this stage.
Yeah, and we didn't see eye to eye with certain things, and I'll probably keep that to myself.
As what happens in some jobs when pressures are high,
Yeah,
people have got different ideas, different sort of
and
plans.
I'll be truthful, and obviously if he gets to hear it, and obviously there's a chance he will. I mean, so he's a good lad. He got give me that opportunity, but we got beat up at Altrincham 5-0, and we as a club didn't see him for, I think we saw him once in about 3 weeks as a manager.
So he took a notice
Well,
of leave.
he lived in Crewe. He
Okay.
lived in Crewe, so he stayed up in Crewe. He came down every so often, and then it just worked out that he came in, and I pulled the lads together. And I think this is when I really started being a manager and a knowledge and a leader of men, if that makes sense. And it sounds a bit dramatic, but that's how I saw it.
Bit like Gladiator.
Yeah, and I just grabbed the lads together and I said, look, I think, you know, if we don't get our arse into gear, we're going down, and I ain't going to be associated with a team that's going down. And
What was the response from the players?
very good, and we ended up staying up, and I didn't take an awful lot of credit for it. Jim took that, which I thought was very unfair, and I just let it be known that I thought I had a contribution, and we just didn't see eye to eye, and the relationship and my job finished. So,
Are you disappointed with the way that part of your life and that association with Cambridge and with Jim, and no doubt you were friends with at some point?
Yeah. No,
how that ended?
Unfortunately, yes, but I think that's unfortunately that's football. And like, you know, I've got mates that I've lost in football because I couldn't afford to keep them.
Terrible, isn't it?
It is, and I don't, and that is one side of it, and that's when you come back to mates that you've played with or you know, and probably anything that I've come from that is to sort of like, no, they're work associates, and like I get on very well with all my staff at this moment in time, and they are friends, but they're more. It's more official, but we happen to have moulded as friends. Does that make sense? They haven't been mates beforehand. We've got a working relationship going, and yeah.
Do you think that's from experience, like you've had, where you've had like you said, you've lost friends, you've gained friends, but that experience now gives you the mindset of where you are and how to deal with people in a work environment? No,
definitely. And I think that, you know, the thing I would just say every time, just be honest with people. You know, don't do anything behind players and other people's backs. It's got to be upfront. If you think that they're not pulling their weight, you tell them. If you think they're not good enough, you tell them. If you think that they're excelling, you tell them. And you know, I think you know, I'm very, very big into healthy mental health. Very, very big into it. And
interesting. Something we've not actually touched on during this podcast.
We haven't, and I just think it's, you know, it is probably for another stage. And if you know, wish to sort of maybe, you know, do it for another stage on it, but you know, I'm a mental health first aider at my college. I try and make sure that we keep our players as happy as we possibly can. And for argument's sake, I run this academy. I look after the fourth team because they need better care. They need better mental health care. They need more coaching, rather than the elite lads to a degree will need less coaching. I know there's an argument to that, okay, but they are probably, because they are the better lads, they are having more opportunities, whereas the lads that are probably struggling a little bit,
they'll have
need more
demons.
coaching.
Yeah.
And to be fair, once you've turned these lesser players round, they've got more dedication and attitude than probably the more elite ones, who it's come a little bit more natural to.
Interesting. Comes back to that old saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work.
Yeah, no, very true.
Let's fast forward to where we are now with Royston. Hope I'm not missing anything out.
No, not at all. I think we've covered it. And
are you fully badged up now? You've got all your qualifications.
Other than a pro license, which I can only do if I work full time at a football club, in a league football club.
Something you would aspire to, given the opportunity.
I would at some stage. Whether I could, yeah, would be the bottom line. I would. But that won't happen unless I go into an academy or I get a job at an EFL club.
Are you actively applying for these positions? Are you actively looking to further develop what you're doing?
To be totally true for you, James, it's so difficult, and I find it because I've got certain traits that I like to keep to. Strictly speaking, I'm manager of Royston Town Football Club.
So you wouldn't even want to put yourself in a position where you're not focused on Royston?
So there's a job vacancy going on at Chelmsford at this moment in time, which is close to me. There's a job vacancy at Cambridge United that's obviously near to me. Okay. How do I make myself interested without being disloyal to my present
It's a very interesting
company?
point, Steve. It's a very interesting point.
And this is where managerial stuff has got so much double standards. So what is it? I get someone to ring up? Do I do this? Do I do that? Is that disrespecting?
And it still all has a sort of underhand feel to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
If you're even talking about, I can see you by your face. It's not something you'd be comfortable with.
I won't sell the name. There was a chairman that rung me up, and I've had about 4 phone calls since I've been at Royston because we've been very successful. But I had a phone call last summer from a team that had got promoted, and the approach stopped because I just said, not a problem. Please ring Royston Town, get permission.
Do it officially.
Never heard a thing back.
Do you think that's because they'd be inclined to maybe have to play, I don't know, compensation? Or
No, I really don't know. I really don't know.
Do you think it's just where football likes to deal direct, do you think it is?
Yeah, well, I think, and I think that's the standards you've got in the EFL don't translate itself into non-league football. Non-league football's a little bit half a daily stuff where it's behind the back, sort of it's a little bit, a little bit ooh, a little bit you sort of right, okay, don't tell him, but I'm making this phone call. And like a lot of managers do it, a lot of chairmen do it, a lot of secretaries do it, and like sort of probably I've been at I was at Takeley and obviously left towards Royston. I'm at Royston, I think this is my 7th year. I've had avenues that the chairman has known about every single along the way. Sudbury came in, I told him. Harlow made an approach, I told him. This other club, which I'm not decided to tell, but they come in, but I told the chairman. And like, I don't know, is that that I've got that amount of principles that I'm not getting on? I think it probably is.
Don't football managers have agents? Is it just the players that have agents?
Yeah, and
ain't there someone that's meant to be a barrier? So you're not in a position where you're not doing anything wrong because you're not communicating or even having discussions. This is why people have sort of representation or someone that can be a buffer in the middle of these.
I think agents in general are very, very reluctant to take on managers because I think
it could be a conflict of interest as well with the team and players future down the line and
slightly.
Yeah, if you get what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I do. And to be fair, I've had that one agent that weren't the greatest because I don't trust agents, if I'm honest.
Interesting.
I think someone's been flagged up to me who I know. I would like to have a conversation and maybe because
with the player directly.
With the agent. Right, sorry. But I think agents in general would rather go with 10 players and one manager. I don't think they're going to get much money out of managing. They're certainly not going to get any money out of managers that are going from non-league club.
Interesting.
There isn't any compensation. So where are they going to get it other from?
Where's the revenue or the monetisation for their time?
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Very interesting. Times have changed since you had your first agent and didn't make use of him. Agents now are sort of rife in the game. Even I'm guessing filtering all the way down to sort of the 5th level and 6th levels as we've spoken about.
Yeah.
What is it like in the level you're at now with agents? And do some of these players have sort of unreasonable demands for the levels that you're playing at? I
don't because I'm not interested in that type of player. and I've got enough of a network that I can pick and choose what I want. I get the proper type of lads. Lad has just come to us who has got an agent. I've not dealt with him. But I have had dealings with him in the past, and he knows that he ain't getting any money out of the non-league football club. If he's going to get anything, he'll get it out of the player. And so, like, you know, sort of there isn't a conversation to be had in regards to you know, sort of them making any sort of profit out of it, if you like, really.
How do you make smaller teams producing players and holding on to them, and bigger clubs sort of taking the players and the compensation system? Do you think the system in play at the moment is correct? And do you think smaller clubs are being rewarded enough for producing these young diamonds and these young players that go on to have multiple transfers, etc.?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I can give you a case in point. We had a lad, Joe Newton, who was at Royston. He's come through a college scheme, not my college scheme, but he's come through a college scheme that was at our college. Very good footballer. He came up to Royston. He's excelled. Cut long story short, he's signed for Coventry City.
As he was in his right to do if his contract is not signed and he's open.
Yeah. You know, now we as a football club, and we're getting quite a good reputation for it, is that we will look after lads. Now, if you've got a player like that, you can do one or two things. You can put them on a contract, and they might be paid well, and they'll play for you. And he ain't going nowhere because
the legalities
are not going to pay money for non-league footballers.
Really?
Generally.
We'll come on to this.
Okay. So what we do, we've done it the other way round, and we've had a lad. Oh crikey, I've got his. He was at Royston, and he's now at Ipswich, but he moved to Wolves from Cambridge United. And I forget the lad's name. It will come to me in a minute. But with Joe, and with anyone that we've asked up that has got, or what we think's got, a pathway into possibly EFL stuff, is that we say to them, come and play for us, sign a contract. You've got our word that if anyone comes in for you, league club above, so in this case it was Coventry City, you'll go with our blessing for nothing, but with a sell-on clause. And that's what's happened. And we've got one or two more in the pipeline.
So, for hypothetically speaking, it could be 20%, 30%, whatever the clause would be.
Because bottom line, if you're gonna at Royston Town and you're gonna get little Johnny that's doing well in centre midfield, and we go, right, yeah, he's really good, and I know Cambridge United are looking at him, and Wimbledon are looking at him, and he's really interested. Could we go like that? Yeah, okay. Well, 20 grand. Both EFL clubs would run away.
Deal literally won't materialise.
It won't happen.
That's
so
incredible.
that poor kid is sort of like, so what we've done...
He's going to hate his host club. It's going to be very frustrating.
What we've done is like, no, what we would like, if Joe Newton, this is, because we've got a case in point.
If he excels and progresses, and then you sell him for...
Now, Coventry have been very, very good about it, and they've offered to give us £1,000 for every 10 appearances. £1,000 for an appearance up to 10 appearances. Yeah. So we can get 10 grand out of it. Yeah. And he's got a 20% sell-on clause. So,
which could be massive for the club.
Of course.
Could be standard. It just depends on the boys'
that
success.
Gets set. Will Norris, I beg your pardon. I know I've gone backwards. Will Norris is the lad that he went from Cambridge United up to Wolves.
Yeah.
We got a percentage at Royston. Okay, so the proof's in the pudding with Will. We've done exactly the same.
That's a great system.
Exactly the same there.
You're not hindering your young players.
We're attracting lads because lads are sort of going, no, Royston do it well, and like the only ones that won't come up to us that don't trust us, and because you can't actually put it in writing, that we'll let them go, if you like. We can't, you know, they're not honour free, but we would say we won't stand in their way, if that makes sense.
I get it. Why do you think there's a reluctance from league clubs, as you've mentioned, to want to pay non-league clubs a fee, whether that's disclosed or non-disclosed, for taking one of their players? Because the money, for me, seems to be more needed at the level that they're losing players. So why do you think there's a reluctance to pay, even like you said, 20,000 for a top player?
Because £20,000 for any team outside the Championship is a fortune. I would probably say all of the EFL teams outside the Championship are losing money, and if you're looking at 20 grand, 10 grand, that is a serious amount of money, and it's a serious investment.
Would you say them clubs are then rolling the dice, trying to get to the Championship, trying to get to the Premier League?
Yeah.
And then that's when they're sort of looking at spending.
Well, the proof's in the pudding. You know, one of my old clubs, and like, you know, sort of I know a few of them that are up there as staff now, and the money that's being spent in wages at Peterborough is frightening. Absolutely frightening. You know, their budget is a Championship budget, and so they should be pushing. You know, Peterborough are a bad example in as much as going into non-league football, because they'll do that. They will do that. They're one of very, very few teams that will take a chance.
But again, you take that chance. If you don't get the rewards, you can implode your club, as we've seen with clubs recently.
But at the same time, you know, you've had, you know, going back to Barry, our favourite lad, but he's, you know, he's got lads in semi-recently. Craig McCall-Smith, McLean, Jules Boyd, all lads come out of non-league.
Very experienced players.
All lads that are Aaron McLean, all come out of non-league football and all sold on at a huge profit for Peterborough's game.
So it's been fantastic to spend a bit of time here, get you on the channel, looking back on your career. Some of the things, I know there's some of the stories we haven't touched on, and there's a lot of stuff that we haven't been into, but I found it fascinating just to listen to some of your career and some of your achievements. From the outside in, looks like you've had a fantastic time with it.
No, thanks, James. Yeah, no, it's been a good journey. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully, it's not to the end of the journey, and I would like to try and press on and test myself, and I'd love to get into the EFL. I'm realistic enough to know that that is unlikely unless I get myself a club that could actually get promoted into it. But you know, there's always hope, and I'll always try and do it the right way.
Steve Castle, you're a top man. I really enjoyed your company, and thank you very much for coming on Full Court Football 24.
Thanks, James.